Day 9 finishes in the middle of Brian Albert's testimony in the Karen Reed trial. And that is an interesting way to conclude a day. We're going to be discussing that at the end of this video. But first, let's go talk about the other testimony that came out in Day 9. So it continued with Julie Albert. And you'll recall in my last video that I discussed some different possible avenues for cross-examination with Julie Albert on the stand, some of the inconsistencies that I found or questions that I had that I think I would have explored if I was in the shoes of Mr. Yannetti or Alan Jackson, whoever wants to cross-examine Julie Albert. Nevertheless, Mr. Yannetti did not listen exactly to what I told him, and that was obviously mistake number one. Still, nevertheless, he brought out some interesting points. One of the points being, and he reiterated this again, that Julie Albert testified that she didn't really speak to Courtney Proctor that often. Remember, the trooper Michael Proctor was the lead investigator for the state for this crime, and his sister Courtney Proctor was good friends with Julie Albert. And Julie Albert said, yeah, we were friends, but we rarely spoke on the phone. And he said, are you sure you want to stick with that? We've got records here that shows that over certain, 6-7 months, you've spoken 67 times. And especially on the day of the arraignment of Karen Reed, you spoke. And after the arraignment, you also spoke for an extended period of time. So what was that about? She couldn't recall. She couldn't recall exactly what they spoke about, but I think it's pretty obvious what they were speaking about. They were speaking about Karen Reed being arraigned and the charged and probably the investigation and things like that. But she claims that she does not recall what those conversations were about. Now, she did testify that she was interviewed with her husband together. So Julie Albert was interviewed together with her husband. Not exactly the best way to interview potential witnesses or suspects. Nevertheless, she did admit that. Mr. Yannetti had a phone log which showed that she actually called Trooper Proctor on his personal cell phone the day that she was interviewed, and Trooper Proctor called her back, and that conversation extended for 4 minutes. She also acknowledged that Karen Reed and John O'Keefe did not have any disagreements that night. From what she could observe and tell, everything was completely fine. And that's consistent with everyone's testimony that it seemed that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were getting along just fine at the bar. Then she says that her husband, Chris, when Chris Albert did eventually come home, he walked home and he was very cold and he didn't wash up, didn't brush his teeth, just jumped right into bed, going to sleep. And she also testified that Chris actually did fall asleep before Colin came home. Now, remember, Colin went to visit Brian Albert Jr., to celebrate some birthday together, even though everybody else was going to celebrate it at bars. But Brian Albert Jr. stayed home, and Colin Albert joined him there. And when Colin Albert came home, Chris was already sleeping. And this is interesting, as I pointed out in my last video, because if Chris was sleeping, then how does he know how much time elapsed from the time that he fell asleep or from the time that he came home and when Colin came home? The only possible way that he can really know that is if his wife told him. And so it could be Julie told him, oh, by the way, you just fell asleep, but Colin just came home and said goodnight. There also was a little bit of a discrepancy about what exactly Colin told or spoke to Julie about. According to Chris Albert, he just poked his head and said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm home. Love you. Good night. And according to Julie, there was more of an extensive conversation or extended conversation more about how are you feeling? Are you feeling any better about the migraine? I questioned again how Colin found that out. Some people gave some interesting suggestions in the comments. Still, I think worthwhile to explore with Julie on the stand. How did Colin find out about your migraine? Could be some people suggested she already had it before. Didn't seem that way from the testimony. It's possible, but I think it would have been worthwhile exploring to see exactly how that adds up. Okay, but nevertheless, a little bit of a discrepancy exactly what Colin said to Julie when he came home. Then she eventually did come to 34 Fairview. As we spoke about in the last testimony, she woke up and she saw a missed call, but she had this ritual, all these rituals that are going on. She had this ritual that she would bring donuts to Brian Albert Jr. on the day of his birthday. So she went to Dunkin' Donuts and brought them over to 34 Fairview and was going to just drop off the donuts with a card in his car, which is so interesting. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but that's what her story was. And then when she was there, Brian Albert Sr. came out of the house and said, "You better come inside. Let's talk a little bit." But when she was at 34 Fairview, she testified that she did not see any police. She did not see any tent. She did not see any crime scene tape. She did not see any glass. She didn't see any tail light pieces. She didn't see any of that. At some point around 8:53 in the morning that morning, she sent Jennifer McCabe Sergeant Michael Lank's personal cell phone number. So that was something that obviously Jennifer wanted, and she sent it to him. Eventually, April 3rd, state police did look through her phone, but did not seize her phone or perform an extraction on her phone. All right. So on redirect, that was essentially the cross-examination. On redirect, they brought out that Mr. Lally brought out that 67 times over 7 months would you consider that a good friend? Or do you talk to your friend a lot more often than that? And she's like, no, there's 67 times over 7 months is not that much. It's not so much. It's not like you're talking every single day. You know, you may be talking some weeks more than others, but it's not so many times. You could technically refer to that as rarely speaking. Now, what was interesting is there was a break in the action, a break in the actual trial, and there was a motion before the next witnesses are going to be called. There was a motion to kick out Turtle Boy from the courtroom. He's there as a reporter. He has a press pass in order to get into the courtroom, and that courtroom is very, very small. It seems like not many seats available in that courtroom, probably a line out the door in order to get seats into that courtroom. So he's sitting there, and the state, Mr. Lally, the Commonwealth, brings a motion that he should be kicked out of the courtroom for certain witnesses' testimony. And you see, actually, Turtle Boy's attorney getting up there and arguing on behalf of Turtle Boy to keep him in the courtroom. And one of the things that he argues is that on procedural grounds, this motion should be denied. Why? He says, because I just got the motion. I was actually in this courthouse for an unrelated matter to the Karen Reed trial. I was on here on a different case, and they just happened to see me and say, hey, by the way, we're about to argue this motion in 10 minutes. You want to argue on behalf of your client? And now, obviously, that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate service on your client or on you as an attorney. You have to have some notice. You have to have be served this in the appropriate ways with enough time to be able to respond. So number one, he was saying procedurally, this should not be, the motion should not be granted. And even substantively, there's some arguments to be made that this goes against his First Amendment rights, and he's not going to say anything. He's just reporting, and he's not going to be doing anything. He's not going to be threatening anyone. He's not going to be looking at them. He's just simply going to be reporting. I mean, maybe looking at them. But the point is that he's just sitting there like a regular reporter, and he should be allowed to come in. He did everything he's supposed to do. He got his press pass, and he has a seat in the courtroom. He should be allowed to cover the case. Well, the first thing the judge asked the Commonwealth to respond to is that, well, he just said that you haven't served him. The attorney hasn't been served, and he was just happened to be in the courthouse, and that's when you served him with this motion. How is that fair? And the state responded simply, Mr. Lally, he responded simply that we don't have to serve him. It's actually not the rules because he's not a party to this case. We don't have to serve him or his attorney. We don't have to serve the attorney. I guess the rules are that all he has to serve is the Associated Press. I'm sorry, I did not look up the exact rules here, but according to the Commonwealth, all you have to do is serve the Associated Press, and you don't have to even serve the attorney. They did everything they're supposed to do, and therefore the procedural challenge is not going to work. That was the Commonwealth's response. And he said that the case law is clear that as long as there is a substantial reason to exclude someone from the gallery when a witness is testifying, then the judge should not allow that person to sit in the gallery. So here you have Turtle Boy, who's being charged with witness intimidation and all the things that all the way he's been vocal and going out to these people's houses and demonstrating or whatever else he's doing. These people can feel intimidated by him, and they may not be so forthcoming and honest with their testimony if they see him in the courtroom. And therefore, that's a good enough substantial reason. The judge agreed with the Commonwealth, said Turtle Boy's got to stay out for specific people, including Julie Nagel, Chris Albert, Colin Albert, Michael Proctor, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert Jr., and Yuri Buchanek. So all these people, when they're testifying, Turtle Boy is not allowed to be in the courtroom. However, she did say that The general rule is that anyone who leaves the courtroom loses their seat, and anyone else who wants can take it. We are going to keep a seat open for Turtle Boy for all the other witnesses. All right, so that was the little bit of a break in the action about that motion. And now let's move on to Nicole Albert. Nicole Albert is Brian Albert's sister. So the first thing that she testifies is that actually it was Brian Albert Jr.'s 23rd birthday. Now this is important, even though it seems like who cares what birthday is because Chris Albert, remember the owner of the pizza store, he said that they have a ritual. And they have a ritual that when somebody turns 21, they all go to the pizza store and they make pizzas and they have a little bit of a party there, right? And that's part of the reason why they wanted to go to the pizza store after the waterfall was closing. So here you see straight out that Brian Albert Jr. was not turning 21, he was turning 23. Is this a ritual that they have every single birthday, or is it just 21? It sounded like from Chris Albert that it was just when you turn 21 that they had this ritual. Now remember, that was also not the testimony that we also heard that it wasn't just because he turned 21. It was actually because people were maybe hungry and wanted to go to the pizza store to just continue the party. So there were some discrepancies there, exactly what the purpose of going to the pizza store was. So that's just interesting what's going on with that pizza store and what was the suggestion that we're going to continue the party there. What's the reason for that? All right. Nicole Albert said that she never met Karen Reed before that night. And then after that night when they were all at the waterfall, she told Jennifer McCabe that if she wants to come home and say happy birthday to Brian Albert Jr., she is welcome to. So essentially, Nicole is not inviting the entire party to come back to her home. She just told Jennifer, hey, if you want to stop by afterwards to say happy birthday to Brian Albert Jr., no problem, come on by. And that's all that she remembers inviting anybody. She didn't invite the entire party. But she says that if anybody wanted to come, no problem. We have an open house. Come on by. We're all family here, essentially, and you can all stop by. No problem. Then she said when she did get home, Colin was still there. Colin Albert, remember Chris and Julie's son, and he was there, but he had a ride home, and he left very shortly afterwards. She doesn't know who gave him a ride home. Brian Higgins left around 1:30ish in the morning. After that, Jennifer and Matt McCabe left at 1:45. Everybody was gone around 2. Caitlin was the last one to leave. Her boyfriend Tristan picked her up. And she testifies very clearly that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed never came into that home. And she was not even aware that they were coming either. Now, here's also an interesting part, which came out also during Brian Albert's testimony, is that the door apparently was left unlocked. And the testimony came out that this wasn't just, oh, wow, so strange. This one night, somehow, the door was left unlocked. It seemed, from their testimony again, that occasionally the door would be left unlocked. You know, sometimes people just forget to lock up and leave the door unlocked, which is it just hit me as a little strange. You know, most, I think, people are careful, even when their kids are coming in and out and they're getting older and they're coming in and out all hours of the night. But especially here, when you're really up, the latest ones there, you know everyone's leaving, you're not sleeping yet, you can go down and check on the door and make sure the door's locked. I think most carefully safe people would do that. Now, it could be this area is a very, very safe area, and therefore they're not nervous about crime. But it just, I don't know, just something about it seems a little bit funny to me, the way that they're so nonchalant about, yeah, sometimes the door's left unlocked, sometimes it's locked, whatever. It just seems a little interesting to me. And both Nicole and Brian testified to that this wasn't just like a one-off weird situation. It was something that commonly the door would be left unlocked. So any suggestions on that, any thoughts on that, I'd like to hear in the comments as well. Now, here's also where part of the story gets very interesting. And that is that Nicole Albert testified that Jennifer McCabe, remember, Jennifer was searching with Karen Reed as well as Carrie Roberts. They came to the 34 Fairview, and that is when Jennifer was sent by Sergeant Michael Lenk to go wake up Brian and Nicole Albert. And we spoke about the problem with really sending a potential witness or suspect to go corroborate with other witnesses or get other witnesses. Okay, but that was a different conversation. But here, she actually gets into the house. She goes up to she opens the door, I guess, herself. She doesn't knock on the door, which this is just interesting. She's not knocking on the door. She actually lets herself in the house. She goes up the stairs and bursts into their bedroom. Okay, so this is not knocking on the bedroom door. Hey, it's Jennifer. Guys, please wake up, knocking on the door. She bursts into their bedroom door. So the door's unlocked. She walks, lets herself in without knocking, without saying, hello, I'm here, coming up the stairs. Just want to not scare anybody. Doesn't do that. She bursts into their bedroom. And according to Nicole, this is what she says. She says, he's out in the snow. We found him in the snow. We don't know if he's okay. That was essentially the extent of what she was saying to Nicole Albert. And Nicole even said, I believe, and again, I didn't write this down, but I think that this is what she said, that she didn't even know who she was talking about. And she didn't hear anything about anyone being dead. She just heard that we don't know if he's okay. He's out in the snow. We found him in the snow. And she also testified that she was hysterical, that Jennifer McCabe was hysterical. And Brian Albert also said the same idea. He didn't say completely hysterical, but he said very close to being hysterical. She was really beside herself. Now, remember, if you look at the dash cam footage, there's only one person very clearly hysterical, and that was Karen Reed. Jennifer McCabe seemed pretty calm, at least from the dash cam video, from what I remember seeing. So, and even her walking up to the house when she was sent there by Sergeant Michael Lank, she didn't seem to be running and beside herself. So it seems that as soon as she entered that house, according to the testimony here, she all of a sudden lost it and became hysterical. So I don't know. Maybe we're going to hear more testimony about that. Maybe she actually really was hysterical. But at least from the dash cam video and from the paramedics and from the responding police officers, it seems that there was one person there who was clearly hysterical, and that was Karen Reed, and everybody else there was kind of more in control of themselves. But according to Nicole and Brian, when Jennifer burst into their room, and they both said that they burst into the room, she was hysterical. And now also, according to Brian Albert, which he testifies afterwards, according to Brian Albert, she said something about the effect that John is dead. So here you have Nicole Albert, which she didn't say that Jennifer said that John's dead. All she said was that he's out in the snow. We found him. We don't know if he's okay. And that would make more sense if you don't really know what's going on, because he was taken to the hospital. So you don't know much. All you know is that, all Jennifer should know is that Karen Reed's going nuts. And Karen Reed is asking, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? All the time. And no one said for sure he's dead. The paramedics are working on him. They took him to the hospital. So how would Jennifer McCabe tell Brian Albert he's dead? I know he's dead. Or at least saying that to him, and not even questioning way. So I thought that was also interesting. And also the fact that their stories are a little bit different. Jennifer is saying that she never said that he's dead, and Brian said that something to the effect that John's dead. All right. So eventually she came down to speak to Sergeant Lank, as we've heard about before. She didn't see any ambulance. After Sergeant Lank left, at some point Brian Higgins came to join them. He was called back, actually, and Brian Albert said that he called Brian Higgins. In his testimony, he said he called Brian Higgins to come back to the scene. She was interviewed a couple of days later. And now we get into the German Shepherd story. And this was interesting also. They had a German Shepherd called Chloe. Chloe slept in the bedroom. And at some point, it came out that the German Shepherd, their dog, was not friendly towards other dogs. That's what Nicole Albert's testimony was. He was friendly towards strangers, strange humans, but not so friendly to stranger dogs. So strange dogs, the German Shepherd, Chloe, was not so friendly with. And there was an instance in which, at one point, according to Nicole Albert, what happened was that this German Shepherd attacked another dog, and the owner of that dog was trying to protect the dog at some point, and the German Shepherd also got a piece of that owner, attacked that owner, and it was actually two different people who were sent to the hospital. So it wasn't just like a little bite. It seems like they were serious enough, or they felt it was serious enough, that they actually went to the hospital. But according to Nicole Albert, that was only because there was another dog involved. But generally speaking, the German Shepherd was okay around strangers, and she didn't say this straight up, but this was the implication. Now, in April 2023 is when they sold the house. And this is a important part for the defense's case. For Karen Reed's case, this is an important part, because why would you go and sell this house? This is a house that's been in your family for a very, very long time. You grew up in this house. Brian Albert actually had his childhood in this house. His parents owned this house, and then eventually he took over the house, and he lived there for many years. He raised his family there, and now all of a sudden, after this murder, after everything that happened, all of a sudden he sells the house and he moves. So doesn't that seem curious? And that's a point that the defense is going to be making. They've made already. So in order to explain this, this is what the Commonwealth brings out. She says that really, even though they moved in April 2023, but really they got the idea in the end of 2021. Because at the end of 2021, that's when Chris Albert sold his house, and the market was very good. It sold very quickly. So they thought that they should also list their house in 2021. Nevertheless, it still took a long time for that house to sell. So they said that they contacted a realtor, and this is also, it's a little interesting, because if you find out that in 2021, the housing market is great, the market's great, the house will sell quickly. And therefore you speak to a realtor, okay, let's list the house in the end of 2021. If you see the house is not being sold and the market is not as great as you thought it was, and it's taking a year and a half for it to sell, I mean, what happened? So I guess the explanation here would be that they listed the house in 2021 because of that idea, but once they got into house selling mode, so then they decided that it's probably a good idea to sell the house, and they're going to sell it no matter what, and however long it takes. So I don't know. It's not clear. I guess it didn't come out clearly if was it on the market the entire time from the end of 2021 through the date of the sale in 2023? Did they take it off the market at certain points? What exactly happened? Did they get any offers on the house? That wasn't brought out. I think it would have been worthwhile to bring out some of that information on cross-examination. Maybe they know it, but none of this information came out. Nobody asked them, did you get any offers on the house? And when did the offers come in? And how many offers? And was it always listed? Was it not always listed? I think that would have been worthwhile to go through, because there's something interesting about, well, Chris sold it in 2021 very quickly, so therefore we listed it, and then it doesn't sell for a year and a half. And exactly what did you get for it? What did you pay for it? What do you think that was in the market value? I don't know. I think that there's some questions there. All right. On cross-examination, that was essentially with direct, and I brought out some points that were brought out in cross-examination as well. But some other points that they wanted to bring out is that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were fooling around with fake fighting in the waterfall. We saw that on the security camera. Nothing serious. It just looks like they were playing around. He said that he brought out that Brian Albert does have some sort of boxing experience. And also he was in the Marine Corps, which would also suggest that he had some fighting experience, hand-to-hand combat. So he does have some experience there. Now, when she was going through the different cars that were in the driveway that day, and this is going to be an important part of this case, because some of the theories, at least that were brought forth, not that we've seen yet in testimony or in trial, I'm assuming we're going to be hearing about this as they come up, but some of the theories in this case, one of the theories is that the Ford Edge was actually used to block the area where John O'Keefe was. At some point in the middle of the night, they had this phantom, at this point, this snowplow driver who passed by and saw the Ford Edge parked right in front of where John O'Keefe's body was found later, and something like at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there's no evidence of this coming out yet. This is just from reports that we're seeing online. But something that was brought out during cross-examination was when Nicole Albert was going through the different cars that they had in the driveway that night, she forgot to mention or didn't mention the Ford Edge. And therefore, cross-examination here was, this Ford Edge has significance. Why did you conveniently leave that out when you're discussing the cars that you have in your driveway? And she said, okay, she didn't really answer that much why she forgot it. She just forgot it. She didn't mean to. All right. Now, another part that came out was that this German Shepherd dog, was rehomed in May of 2022. And apparently, what it seemed by during trial was that this was information that that the defense just became aware of while Nicole Albert's on the stand, which is strange. And this is what they brought out. They said, you've never told us that before. We've actually asked, we've sent requests. Where is that dog now? And Why haven't you ever turned that information over? Now, that was objected to, and there was some sidebars about it, and some objections were sustained. But there's something funny going on here with this discovery. The discovery about where the dog is now. Was it rehomed? Was it put down? Where's that dog? And this seems to be the first time that the defense is learning about it. So what exactly is going to happen with that information that they just found out now? And pursuant to some discovery requests, they didn't get that information. We're going to see how that plays out. But that seemed to have come out that they didn't really know about this until she's on the stand now, which is a problem. All right. Now, in July 2023, they bring out that in her grand jury testimony, she said, this is Nicole Albert, she said that she didn't know where Brian Higgins and Brian Albert were for a certain amount of time. So everyone's together in the middle of the night at the Alberts' home. Everybody comes there. And all of a sudden, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins disappear. And nobody knows where they are. And Nicole Albert said in her grand jury testimony, I didn't even know where they were. I don't know where they were, and I don't know what they were doing. And so she brought that part. The defense attorney brought that part out. She also said that you didn't tell Sergeant Link that Caitlin left around 2 a.m., which is what you testified to today. Rather, you told him that she left at 12:15. That's the difference in discrepancies in the time there. All right. Also, you didn't tell Trooper Proctor that Colin Albert was at your home either. When you were saying who was at your home, you conveniently forgot to mention Colin Albert. Why did you do that? Also, you didn't tell him that Brian Albert Jr. was there with his two girlfriends there. Why didn't you say that part? Are you trying to protect them? Why didn't you say that? And her response to that was when she was asked who was at the house, she wasn't considering Colin there because Colin left 2 minutes within her coming home. So as soon as Nicole came home, essentially Colin left. So that's why she didn't mention that Colin was there, because she didn't really consider him there. When she considered him there, what she considered there was all the people hanging out in the kitchen afterwards, not the fact that Colin left that minute. What about Brian Albert Jr.? No explanation really there. She also didn't mention Colin Albert to Sergeant Link. Okay, we brought that out. She didn't notice any fire trucks outside of her house. When they're all gathered around there, she was just sleeping right through everything. And this is a question that a lot of people have. If you have all these lights, now the testimony has been that they didn't put on their sirens, so it was just lights, and they have pretty good shade darkeners, and they sleep deeply, or maybe they wear eye masks. So it's possible that they didn't really see what was going on there, all the commotion in front of their yard. But their bedroom window is literally right facing their front yard. So as good as your shade darkeners are, you're probably going to see some of the lights going on there. There's a lot of patrol cars, fire trucks, and ambulances there. All those lights together, you would think something would happen, wake you up or something. But they testimony from both both Nicole and Brian were that they did not wake up from any of these lights. Now, another thing that brought out was that Jennifer came in at around 6:45 in the morning, or around 6 a.m. But later, her testimony was certainly after, let's say around 6:30 in the morning. Nevertheless, they have some phone records. This is the defense brought out. They have phone records that there was a phone call made at 6:07 and 6:08 that were answered. So some of their extraction reports to celebrate, we're going to see, has that at 6:07 or 6:08, there was a phone call from Jennifer to Nicole, and those calls were answered. So what happened there? You're claiming that you didn't wake up till 6:45 in the morning from Jennifer bursting into your room, but there was phone calls that were answered, and she says, I don't know what to tell you. All I can tell you is that I didn't speak to anybody that morning. So I don't know who answered my phones, if they were answered, if there was a mistake in the celebrate report, whatever, or the extraction. All I'm telling you is that I did not answer any phone calls, and I just woke up from Jennifer bursting into my room. All right. On redirect, it was brought out that he asked, well, how long? Remember we said that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins all of a sudden disappeared. And she asked how long, he asked Mr. Lally, how long did they disappear for? And here she remembers it was very short. It's very short and not very long at all. And that was it. I think it would have been a cute idea on recross to say long enough to kill someone and then get objected to, but all right, you made your point. All right. Well, anyway, moving on to Brian Albert. So Brian Albert, as we said, as we heard already beforehand, he was with Brian Higgins on Friday, attending a funeral for a fallen police officer in New York. He flew there, but he drove back with Brian Higgins, and he did acknowledge that he's friends with Brian Higgins. They're good friends. They went first to a establishment called Hillside. He didn't order any food, which was, I just thought was a little interesting, because if he didn't eat all day, why wouldn't you order food at the first restaurant that you went to? He said he got a drink, but he didn't order any food. And then that's at Hillside. That's when his wife, Nicole Albert, called him and said that they're at the waterfall, and if they want to join them at the waterfall. He only met John O'Keefe twice before this incident, also showing that there's not really a close relationship there, why and no motive, I guess, for why Brian Albert would want to kill John O'Keefe. He only met him twice before. He knew that he was friends with the family, but he only personally met him twice. He met Karen once, one time a week before the murder. And also he testified that Brian Jr. was turning 23 on his birthday, not 21. And then he also says, when he was talking about his vehicles, he did go through all the vehicles. He said the Ford Explorer, the Cadillac SUV, the Ford Edge, the Ford Escape, and they didn't use the garage to park the cars in. That's what I guess they used for storage, but they didn't use the garage to park cars in, which is also, I mean, look, everybody does different things with their garage. You would think that in the middle of the winter, in a place like Boston where it probably snows a lot, you'd want to utilize your garage for your cars, so you don't have to sit there scraping your car every morning. But his testimony was that they didn't use the garage to park their cars there. He doesn't remember where Higgins parked. He pulled into the left side of the driveway. He said Colin was there. His two friends, who were girls, Sarah and Julie, were there. Jennifer McCabe and Matt arrived after Colin left. And he spoke about the dog. He said, he had the dog for 6 or 7 years. He let the dog go outside. The dog needed to use the bathroom, so he let the dog go outside. And there was also some testimony about the train tracks there were some train tracks behind his house. And I'm not sure why yet that testimony came out. Maybe we're going to see the significance of that later. But that was an important, that was a point that was brought out for some reason. He said everybody was listening to music, everybody was drinking, having a good time. And where he went, and this is where the interesting part of his testimony is, that where did he go with Brian Higgins? So he actually went with Brian Higgins. This is what his testimony was, to look at pictures, some military pictures, because his son Jack is in the Marines. So he wanted to show Brian Higgins, who also has an Army background, maybe in the Marines as well, Brian Albert. They were both in the Army, and they wanted to see some of the pictures that Jack had. So they went up to Jack's room to look at those pictures together, only for a few minutes, and then came back and joined the rest of the party. So in case anyone's wondering, hey, where did you disappear to? No, it wasn't to kill John O'Keefe. It was actually, we went upstairs to look at some pictures. Okay, then he continues with the story. He said, yeah, Brian Higgins left around 1:30. He was the first to leave. Other people left after him, which is consistent with his wife's testimony. Julie Nagel's brother, one of Brian Albert Jr.'s friends, her brother came. She went outside to meet him and then came back into the house. And also he said that he is not aware of Karen Reed or John O'Keefe coming to his home, and absolutely they never came into his home. And also he testified that the door was left open. Again, this very interesting thing, why they leave the door open. He said that there was no phone call that he made with Brian Higgins that night. And again, there's going to be some records which seem to suggest that there was a phone call between Brian Higgins and Brian Albert that night. So we will see. He also testified that he woke to Jennifer McCabe bursting into his room, which we spoke about earlier, and saying something to the effect that John is dead. All right, Jennifer said that the police are downstairs. They want to speak to him, and he went downstairs to speak to the police. He knew Sergeant Link a couple of times. Again, Sergeant Link's real friend is Chris Albert. He knew of Brian. Brian knew of him, but they weren't such close friends. But of course, he said they would be welcome in my house. They can do whatever they want in my house. Although nobody bothered to ask if they should search the house, but he was suggesting that he had no problem with them coming into his house, searching whatever they wanted, and his house was open for that. Now, he also testified about Julie Albert coming over with the donuts. And I think that it just seems strange to me. And I don't know, like Julie Albert has this ritual where she brings over donuts, and what happens? She leaves them in Brian Albert Jr.'s car. Like, is this the ritual, that she always brings over donuts and leaves them in his car? Is that the ritual? And the car is always unlocked? So these are people that not just leave their house unlocked all the time, but they also leave their cars unlocked all the time? And anybody who wants can go into the car and drop off whatever they want into that car? I don't know, just something is just rubbing me wrong with this. Like, what is going on with this ritual of Dunkin' Donuts? And is it always to the car? Why over here was it to the car? You're just going to literally drop off the donuts at the car and then go home? Like, I don't know. It just raises some questions in my mind about what really was going on with this donut situation. Okay, well, his testimony was that he asked her to come inside, and then even though Brian Albert, said that she should come inside, and this is his house, he brought her inside, and then his testimony was that he didn't really explain to her what happened. There's actually other people that were there that explained to her what happened. All right. She was in shock. She left. Remember, she went home to get Chris, wake up Chris. We spoke about that in the last video, exactly what happened there, some of the discrepancies there, and she comes back with Chris. And then when he was talking about when his interview was with Trooper Proctor, it was interesting. If you listen to what he said, I spoke to a trooper, last name Proctor. So again, it seems like trying to create some distance between himself and Proctor. Just say Trooper Proctor. Like, everybody knows who Trooper Proctor is at this point, right? Michael Proctor. And at the time, it seems like, I spoke to a trooper. His last name was Proctor. Like, okay. I mean, so I thought that was just a little funny how he brought that out. And then he said that they did speak at Jennifer McCabe's house when he spoke to Trooper Proctor, and he said at that point they were separated. So each time Trooper Proctor spoke with each of the potential witnesses, here they were secluded, segregated, they were separated. Then he discussed that yes, a few days later the snow already melted, and the suggestion there is that they're trying to bring out that the reason that the police went back to the scene after a few days later wasn't to plant evidence, of course not. It was just because the snow melted, and that's when they discovered 4 to 3 pieces of broken taillight and some other pieces of evidence at the scene. Only because before it was very hard to find. All they had was a leaf blower with all that snow, so they couldn't find that much. All right. And then he also discussed about their listing their house to sell in 2021 and eventually selling the house in 2023. And of course, this has nothing to do with the murder. And that was the end of Brian Albert's testimony. And the judge left the day that way and said, okay, we're going to come back on Monday with cross-examination. Now, personally, when I'm in a trial, I really don't like this. I don't appreciate this. When you have a witness on the stand, then everything has to be done with that witness before the end of the day. It's not fair. If I'm going to direct a witness, and now the other side has the entire weekend to prepare cross-examination. Now, of course, you always have some cross-examination prepared already. But there are certain things that will come out during the direct testimony that will add to your cross-examination. And you already heard everything in the direct examination. So you have the whole weekend now to prepare for cross-examination. And I don't think that's fair. So if it's me, and again, this judge is running how the procedure works here. If it was me, and maybe this happened, but if it was me, I would have said, Judge, if we're going to start with a witness, I want to finish the witness today. I mean, again, if I was in the prosecutor's shoes, and again, it could be they don't have a choice, or the judge is saying, no, this is how we're doing it, and you're stuck with it. Because again, there's no like court rule or no case law that says that you have to finish with a witness. It's just a question of procedure and fairness. So I would not want to start with a witness if I have to stop in the middle. That's number one. I actually had a situation once where one of my first trials that I did, and I didn't realize this at the time, but the judge actually gave us a choice. And I was with another attorney there, and the other attorney said actually that I should follow this course even though I didn't like it. And I trusted the other attorney. I think at this point I would have done things differently. But one of my first trials, we were up to closing arguments. And it was near the end of the day. And the judge said, how long is your closing argument going to be? And I told him, I don't know, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was. And the judge says, okay, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to let you do your closing. And then we're going to come back. This was Friday. And then we're going to come back Monday, and we will have the other side do their closing arguments, and then you get a rebuttal. Right? So at the time, and the judge said, it's up to you. We can either do everything on Monday, or you can just give your closing now, and then the other side will give their closing on Monday. And the attorney that I was with told me, said, yeah, give your closing now. Why? Because he said then the jury will be just thinking about your closing arguments the entire weekend. And if you do a good job, then they'll be so sold on all the arguments that you made that by the time Monday rolls around, they're not even going to be listening or half listening to the other side's closing arguments, and you're going to win the case. On the other hand, I didn't want that because I didn't want all of my arguments to be taken apart over the entire weekend and giving the other side so much time to figure out a way to rebut my arguments. And that's exactly what happened. I gave my closing argument, and the other side came back on Monday, and they looked like they worked the entire weekend on dismantling my closing argument. And I'm reacting at the time because I give one last rebuttal, but still, like it was just very clear that they had my entire theory of the case, all my arguments, everything that I made, all my arguments about the witnesses and who has credibility and who doesn't, and they were able to now pick out certain pieces of evidence that happened during trial to rebut my closing argument, and it wasn't, and I felt that really disadvantaged me. So from that time on, I've always felt that either we're going to do everything now or we're going to do nothing. We're going to finish with this witness. We're going to do all closing arguments. We're going to do all opening statements. We're not going to, split up the day. At least I try my hardest to do that. Now, again, like I said, the judge can do whatever she wants. This is her courtroom. And if she tells you this is how we're going to do it, then that's what you got to do. But I don't appreciate it, and we will see if the defense put good use to the weekend when it comes to cross-examining Brian Albert. Well, that's it for the recap for Day 9. We will be following the trial continuously this week and giving you updates. Keep it here. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't. Like the video, and we will see you next time.